Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Writers Chat. We are so glad to have you with us today, whether you're here live or whether you are watching the replay. And we have a special guest with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Jan, who is not on camera, but you're going to hear her voice so that she can introduce our very special guest. Jan?
It's so nice to see Eva. I haven't seen her in quite a while. She's a wonderful woman and friend and helper. She is a multiple award-winning best-selling author of both fiction and nonfiction. She is the president of Word Weavers International, the director of Florida Christian Writers Conference, and the managing editor of Firefly Southern Fiction. Eva Marie is a popular speaker at writers' conferences, women's groups. She's an ex-nurse and a seminary graduate. And I found where she said when she's not writing, she's editing. When I'm not editing, I'm running Word Weavers International and using the art of critique. She and her husband make their home in Central Florida where they enjoy their children and grandchildren, and they are owned by one funny cat. We're so happy you're here with us, Eva. Thank you for coming and sharing Word Weavers and the critique sandwich the way you do it.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you for having me. I will tell you, I almost forgot because I am still somewhere up in the mountains and just trying to catch up on everything. And yesterday, those notifications that pop up on your screen, I had one that popped up and it said somebody commented on a post that you are tagged in. And, out of curiosity, I went to see who had tagged me in something and who was commenting on it. And there was an ad for today. And I thought, I'm speaking. And then I realized, oh, I am speaking. So it's a good thing I don't have to practice up on this because I know a little bit about critique groups. And I apologize that my voice is still a little crackly, but that came from talking an awful lot last week. And then sitting on planes where you had to wear masks and airports where you had to wear masks and I'm asthmatic. So I'm just still a little crackly and I do apologize for that. So I want to talk to you about Word Weavers, but not just Word Weavers. I want to talk to you about why I believe critique groups are so important. And then, of course, I want to open it up to some Q&A, and you can ask me about critique groups or you can ask me about anything you want to ask me about. I did laugh because in that introduction, when Jan said I found where she said, well, I'm not writing, I'm doing this, I'm not doing this, I'm doing that. And it's really more that when I'm not running Word Weavers, I'm doing all this other stuff. Word Weavers began, I want to give you a little background history on it. I was in a drama group at a mega church here in the Orlando area. And we performed every week at the church in one capacity or another. And because of that, I had this opportunity. I had, been writing my whole life, but I had this opportunity to start writing for the children's ministry who had their own drama team, their own band. I mean, like I said, this is a mega church. And so there was just mega opportunities for ministry. And so I started writing for their ministry, and I went to church one weekend, and there was a notice. We had a newspaper back in those days. I mean, it was literally a newspaper because the church was so large, and it said that a writers group was forming there at the church, and one of the gals who was involved in both ministries, the drama ministry and the children's ministry, said to me, with all the writing that you're doing for the children's ministry, you should consider going to this. And so I said, yeah, I think I will. And so I had the address. Well, I have to explain to you that I get lost going to the bathroom at night. So the fact that I got lost with clear directions how to get to this house is not a shock. But I ended up in the same neighborhood as the woman who had introduced me to this group. And she's, I saw her house and I went, well, there's Laura's house. And I just pulled up in the driveway and I said, I'm lost. I'm not going. And she poured me a cup of coffee. She drew on a napkin how to get there, pushed me back to the car and said, you should go. And I said, Laura, I hate walking in late. I mean, there's going to be, with 20,000 people at the church, there's probably going to be at least 100 writers there. I don't know what I was thinking. And she said, no, you just need to go. You need to go. So I walked in late, and there were 4 other people there, 4. So there were 5 of us sitting around the dining table of this woman who lived in Longwood, Florida. And we all had the same issue. And that was, we really didn't know what we were doing. We knew we could write, and we had people who came along behind us to help kind of clean up our work, but we wanted to get better. We wanted to serve God with our words, and that it was because it was unto him, that it was the best that we had to give, which means that it's not the first thing that we lay out in front of him. Now, because I was in the drama ministry, that meant that I was often at the church during rehearsal for the praise and worship team, which they were phenomenal then. They're still phenomenal now. I don't attend the church anymore, but they're still a phenomenal group of musicians and singers. And I would hear them when they were practicing, and they were so good. And then sometimes the praise and worship leader would stop and he would say, okay, who hit the E wrong? And I would think, who hit the E wrong? How could you hear that? But years later, my brother and I were watching a video. It was the Michael Jackson video, This Is It, that was put out after he died, where they were just filming all the rehearsals for what was supposed to be his last tour. And when they were practicing, sometimes he would just stop and he would say, okay, you hit that note wrong. And he would go, I can't sing, put a tin bucket over my head. I still can't sing. And he would go, da, da, da. And they would go, da, da, da. And he'd go, da, 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 And they would go back and forth. And they would go, that's it. Do it like that this time. And then they would do it, and he would turn around and go, you did it. That was it. And I'm thinking, how did you hear that? But isn't that what we do? We hear a word and we go, that word's not right. Or we see a semicolon when there should be a comma, or a period when there should be a question mark. Or we see a character that suddenly jumps out of character, or a plot point that just doesn't make sense. Or in a nonfiction work, suddenly it's like, well, that's a rabbit trail you just ran down, and I don't know why. So unless you can come up with a logical reason, I would just get it out. Isn't that what we do? And so, as I'm thinking about this, I said to the group, okay, so how can we help each other? And we just began to meet every month. And that first month, there were 5 of us. And the second month, there were 7 of us. And the third month, there were 10 of us. And in a very short period of time, we had about 15 steady people. Now, remember, we were just in one church. And we realized, because it was like 2 people per month can bring something to critique, we realized we're going to get critiqued like once every 10 years. This isn't going to work. One day, Brian Davis joined us, and Brian now lives in Tennessee, but he was living in our general area at the time. And he said to us, have you ever thought about the cold sandwich critique method? And we're, okay, well, what's that? And he said, it's very simple. You've got a cold sandwich because you're bringing the work to the meeting. They're not getting it ahead of time. See, we were sending it in ahead of time at that point. And some of us were taking the time to read it, and some of us were not taking the time to read it until the last minute. So he says, you're reading it while you are there. And the first part of the sandwich is the bread. This is the top of the sandwich is the bread. And you're going to say something positive about the work, something that works, something you liked, more than one something that you liked. And then you're going to get to the meat of the critique. And then you're going to finish up with another piece of bread. And that's going to be, again, something you like, or a suggestion that tends to lean toward the positive. Within about 2 months after Brian was there, we decided we were going to get really, really serious about this. And we actually named ourselves within that 2 months. We started calling ourselves Word Weavers. We decided we were going to incorporate the cold sandwich critique method. we came up with certain ideas of, how to make us stronger as writers, not just in the craft, but professional as well. And I'll get into some of that later. And then the next thing we knew, we were being visited by people who were from Tampa and from Fort Myers and Fort Lauderdale and the Space Coast and Jacksonville. People were driving 3 hours to get to us once a month and then 3 hours back, and they were carpooling. So that worked. But in 2008, when the gas shortage happened, they were like, we just can't even do this anymore. And that's when we came up with, what we called then sister chapters. And then shortly after that, Jerry Jenkins heard about us and actually saw us in action. And he decided he was going to financially support us and try to get it out across the United States, which ended up being the United States and Canada. After a year, he tossed the little eaglet out of the nest because he is a for-profit. His company is a for-profit. We were a not-for-profit. We take the money that we bring in and we turn it back around and give it back to the members who need help getting to conferences or for any type of writing education, etc. So that makes us a not-for-profit because the money comes in from the members, but then it goes back to the members. And so we decided to form what is now Word Weavers International because we had also started using, at that time, Google Hangouts, or Skype actually was the first, and then Google Hangouts and then Zoom. For those people who did not live near or near a group, or they were housebound or some other reason that they could not get to a meeting, we were forming online groups, and that began to grow and to grow. And as it did, I looked at everything and I said, this is going to be bigger than me. And there was I'm an Old Testament scholar, and there's a wonderful scripture in Exodus when Moses' father-in-law Jethro comes to him and he says, you cannot manage these people on your own. And he lays out that pyramid idea for business leadership. And that's exactly what we formed. And so that's how we got started and how we went from 5 people sitting around a dining room table to nearly 1,000 members now all across the globe. We have 3 pillars in our community that I think are critical to critique groups. And the first one is, of course, community. So that's the members, whether it's the traditional groups or the online groups, whether we're incorporating what we do on Facebook, because we do have Word Weavers International closed group Facebook page. You have to be a member to join that. But then also each individual chapter or each individual page, which is online groups, they have their own pages as well. And again, they're closed groups, but that's community. And what we do at the Facebook page for all Word Weavers is not only to make announcements of things that are going on within the industry, to be able to share what we're doing in our own writing lives, but also education. One of my dear friends who's been in Word Weavers for a long time, and she's one of the presidents. She was the head mentor of traditional groups for quite a while, Jean Weiland. She calls it the living room university because you can sit in your living room, you can open up your laptop, and you can read these blogs, and you can read some of these or listen to some of these podcasts, etc., and grow in your craft. And some will be applicable to you and some will not. So obviously you leave the ones that are not to one side. But if you want to know more about craft, even if it does not apply to your genre, I encourage you to listen or to read, because the more you know, the more you grow. And I absolutely believe that 100%. Another reason community is so important is because as writers, this is a solitary life. I mean, I sit pretty much in my office most days, by myself. It used to be it was by myself with my dog, and then and then she went over the Rainbow Bridge. So now it's just me, because the cat really doesn't like me that much. She loves my husband, but she tolerates me. I'm good if she's hungry, and he's not here, but otherwise, she doesn't care. So it's just me in here, and to have that community that you can go to and you can talk to, for all of its negatives, there's an awful lot of positive to social media. So again, community, I think, is vitally important. And then when we do come together for our group meetings, being able just to see each other for that brief little bit of time, or even when we go to conferences, being able to see each other for that brief little bit of time. Now, I got really tickled, and I'm going to share this with you. If you were at the conference, or if you were watching it for the Blue Ridge Conference, or if you were watching it virtually, that Frank Peretti was the keynote speaker. He was the one everybody was excited about. And oh my gosh, what a hoot. I had the just the joy of sitting next to him as he was preparing for his speech, getting up there for his keynote and all this. And then we rode back to the airport together, and we got stuck in this line because there was no one working the Delta counter. And we just stood there for the longest time. But what I noticed was he was very engaging while he was there. And then once we got through the debacle at the Delta counter, he pulled back. And so once we got to the gate, there were a whole bunch of us from the writers conference at the gate together. And we were kind of having this extended Blue Ridge conference at gate 2, but he was way over in the corner. And I said to Linda Glaze, Frank Peretti has peopled out. I mean, you could tell he was like done, and I think that's the way it is for a lot of us, but that doesn't mean that we want to be alone forever and ever, that we don't want to be with the people who understand what it's like to be a writer, because this, especially if you write fiction, we talk to people who are in our heads, and there are some people who are like that who get put away, but we actually get paid to talk to the people who are in our heads. So community is important. The second pillar, and it's another C, is critique. And of course, I explained to you the sandwich method that we use, but I want to explain to you why it works. Because first and foremost, if I get wind that anyone has ripped apart another writer, it's going to be the wrath of Eva Marie on your head, because we don't do that. We don't do that. There's absolutely no point in that. In all the years, we started in 1997, in all the years that I have been in leadership in what is now Word Weavers International, twice, I've had to go to someone and say, we don't do that. We don't do that here. It is not about ripping somebody apart. It's about building somebody up. And for us as writers, we all have our weak areas. We all have our crutch words. We all have the things that, the areas that we're just simply weaker than we are as strong in others. And so we have these areas where we are strong, and we can build that up. For example, when I first got into published writing, when I walked into the published world, one of the first things that I heard over and over and over again from editors was, you are so strong in dialogue. Well, I knew why I was strong in dialogue. I had spent years working in a drama ministry where everything we had was dialogue, with a little bit of direction. So dialogue was not my problem. Narrative was my problem. And that's what had to be worked on. And so with the sandwich method, someone can say, oh, I really like what you did with that dialogue. But over here in the narrative, you've got about 6 too many adjectives, so narrow it down to 1. And that was kind of my weakness in the early days, was I just had all these adjectives to describe things, which is kind of popular in Southern fiction anyway. And I think that the reason the sandwich method works, truly works, is because it is designed to build us up. And we as human beings don't want to be ripped apart. We don't like being ripped apart. Who wants to go somewhere where you're going to be ripped apart? I mean, I think we're all ladies here, right? How many of you look forward to your mammogram? No, we don't look forward to it. We do it because we have to. But who wants to have their breast squished between two pieces of metal? Nobody. So who would want to go somewhere and say, well, I'm going to my critique group today where they're going to rip me to shreds? No one. But if you think I'm going to go to my critique group today where they're going to point out what works and then help me fix what doesn't, well, then they're going to be there. They're going to be excited about it as well. And then the third pillar, and also a C, is conferences. Part of what we do with the money that we bring in is to make sure those who have worked their rear ends off, but financially just cannot get to a conference, can get to that conference. We help them by paying the way, not just paving the way, but paying the way for them to get there. And I just think that's one of the most important things that we do with our money. Also, sometimes the chapters will say, we don't want to send one person to a conference, but what we would like to do is pay for everyone to be able to go to the virtual conference, which is now a bigger thing than it was before. Or we want to bring in a speaker. Well, it's your money. You can do with it what you want to do with it. So it's all about that growth. It's all about education. But part of the other thing that we do in Word Weavers, in that community, in that critique time, is to make sure that when our members arrive at a conference, that they are prepared, that they are polished, and that they are professional. That's the 3 Ps. We got the 3 Cs, now we got the 3 Ps. And that came about not actually where we thought in terms of, ooh, what can we do to make them polished and prepared and professional? It just kind of happened. And when we looked back, we realized it was because of the way we laid out the critique method, not just that you bring it in and you sandwich your critique to someone, but that when you're being critiqued, you don't speak, you don't argue, you don't get defensive. What we say to our members is this: at the end of the day, this is still your baby. You can do with it whatever you want to do with it. However, if there are 8 of you sitting around the table and 7 have said, I don't think this paragraph works here, I think you need to move it up 2 spaces or 2 paragraphs, I would listen to that. If one person says it, well, then you can make up your mind on your own. And if others then go around the table and say, yeah, that didn't bother me so much, that paragraph, well, then it's up to you to make that decision, because remember, critique is all perspective. And not everybody reads the same thing, and not everybody writes in the same way, etc. So, that is totally and completely up to you. But if 7 out of 7 people say it, you might want to listen. And because we don't allow you to speak unless you're asked a direct question, it teaches you to listen and to take it in here. So what happened was editors and agents at conferences started coming up to me and saying, how are you training these people? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, they didn't argue with me. And now that I'm an acquisitions editor and a managing editor, I know that you get those arguments. You sit down with someone and you say, I like this, but do you think you could, or would you be willing to? And they immediately start telling you how their mother loved it, and their daughter loved it, and their grandkids loved it, and their neighbor raved about it, and you don't know what you're talking about. Well, that's not going to get you anywhere in the industry. The question was, would you be willing to? Okay, just say no. You didn't have to jump on me about it. But now that I see that, I understand why the editors and the agents were so surprised that what Word Weavers members do, hopefully by and large, and all of them, but I know that would be ridiculous with 1,000 members, is that they listened and they took notes. And they said, yes, I am willing to do this. And yes, I think I can do this. And, but would you like, or how can I? And they become a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem. The other thing is in Word Weavers, you've got, your a certain number of words, it's got to be presented a certain way, and you have until a certain time to get it there. So if you're going to a traditional group where you walk in the door with your piece, most of them say you have to be here 15 minutes and no later than the group starts, because they are getting everyone into smaller groups and figuring out how we're going to lay all of this out. And I won't get into the big details of that. But what that does is it teaches you deadlines. And it teaches you that when you do get that contract, and for those of you who have written under contract, I'm looking at Johnny right now, when you are under contract, it is not just your timeline. There are people working in the background like crazy, trying to get everything done. There's the marketing people, the sales people, the cover design people, the copyright people, the people who are laying out the words that you write. Everything has to be done on a schedule. It's not all about you. You're just a piece of the puzzle. And if you don't show up when you're supposed to and do it the way they've asked you to, and the way you signed on the dotted line that you would, it throws everything off kilter. So without realizing it, by saying, this is the way we will do things, we were actually teaching them a discipline. And I find that to be one of the most important assets to being in Word Weavers. So what are some of the additional benefits? Well, in Word Weavers, what we do is we do not read our own word, because we know the inflection of our own words. Someone else reads it. And the way we do it in Word Weavers is the person to the right reads, the person to the left leads the critique. So hearing your work read out loud, you will pick up things that maybe some of the others didn't even pick up. And of course, others will pick it up as well. So it's not just that you are going to get insight from other writers, but you are getting insight from someone who is reading, or from other readers as well. Because of course, if you're a writer, you better, by golly, be a reader as well. And that makes a big difference. It teaches things like word count limit. We bring in 1,500 words, not 1,525 words, although sometimes I know people fudge just a little bit. When we are given a word count by our publishers, whether it's, I want you to write a 1,500 word article, a 300 word devotional, an 85,000 word book, a 50,000 word book, or I'll tell you a little story about something I had to do and how Word Weavers really helped with that. We are learning about word count limit and learning to shorten our pieces and not become so verbose as we are writing. Instead of taking 4 words to say what one word would have sufficed for, we go to that one word. Angie Hunt used to say that when she goes through her self-editing process, every time she cuts a word, she gives herself a quarter. And so she will say like, oh, I just made $1.75 on that one sentence, which is kind of cool. But I want to share with you what happened when I wrote the book, 5 Brides, which I wrote for Tyndale. Now, 5 Brides is based on a true story about 5 young women who moved into an apartment together in 1952, just after at the end of, somewhere after the end of World War II. And they were living in the metropolitan Chicago area. They were 5 young women who didn't really know each other, except that 2 of them were sisters. But they were just sharing an apartment. And they were kind of like ships passing in the night, except for this one Saturday when they all happened to be there, and they all decided that they were going to go catch a matinee. And then after the matinee, they were walking in downtown Chicago. They passed the iconic Carson Peary Scott and Company, which is now a Target, which makes me ill. But this was the type of department store in the 50s. It was like dripping with chandeliers and large Corinthian columns and marbled floors on the inside. And you walked up to a counter and you just looked at gloves, and another counter where you only looked at handkerchiefs and things like that. I mean, just truly, truly like the Doris Day era of department stores. Carson Peary Scott and Company were known for their wedding dresses. To have a wedding dress from Carson's was like the do all be all end all in that era. And there was this beautiful wedding dress in the display window. And they all just for fun decided that they would go in and try it on, that one dress, because they were all the same size, ironically. And they did. And by the end of the day, they had all chipped in $60 each, which was a lot of money for these girls. They had chipped in $60 each, and they bought the dress together and off. And then right after that, they all moved to different places, even different parts of the world, but they all wore the wedding dress. And so I finally got permission from the only surviving bride to tell this story. Tyndale bought it. And because Joan was alive, my suggestion was that I write it in third person point of view, from Joan's POV, and they agreed. And so I had an 85,000 word limit, and I wrote an 85,000 word book in first person point of view. And then I turned it in, and they have 30 days to let me know what they think about it, right? And so at the end of the 30 days, we got on the phone along with my agent, and they said, we really like what you did here, but we didn't love it. And I'm like, oh, great. That's just great to hear. And she said, what we think we want it told in third person point of view from all 5 perspectives. We would like to extend the word count to 120 to 125,000 words. That's a ton of words. And you've got 2 months to do it. So in 2 months, I rewrote that book. And I not only turned in exactly what they asked for, not only did they praise it and give me the last half of my check for it, but that book went to #1 several times in a row, beating out Francine Rivers and C.S. Lewis and Frank Peretti and all these other big names. I could not believe it. I was just absolutely stunned by the success of that book. It's been very successful for me, but I didn't argue with them. I listened and I said, okay, would you like for me to do this? Can I do that? Et cetera, et cetera. 2 months, you say, and you want it from first person to third. Okay. You want it from 5 perspectives. All right. Which meant I was going to have to totally rethink this book. I'll be honest with you. The first 2 days after that, I just stared at my computer. I just couldn't move. And then I said, okay, girl, get to work. And I came up with an idea and I made it work. But I credit what I've learned in Word Weavers, that I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't demand. I just said, yes. And how can we do this as a team? And we did it as a team. It also, being in critique groups and having it run like Word Weavers, because I'm very well aware of the fact that there are some critique groups that don't work well at all. I've heard about them. People have come to me with their stories. But it allows you to accept new ideas, or it teaches you to accept new ideas. To hear someone say, have you thought about, again, as an example, have you thought about, instead of telling this in first person, telling this in third person? And in other areas, we've had that conversation where, I have suggested in my own groups, and I say, why don't you try this in third person, just see how it feels? Or why don't you try this in first person and just see how it feels? Because I do that for myself too. When I'm writing, I often think I'm going to do this in first person. I've decided to tell this story in first person, but then I think, all right, let me just try one chapter in third and see which one feels the most natural to me. And so I can suggest that. And being in a group like this opens you to accepting new ideas. And again, like I said, deadlines and discipline. I just think that those 2 things just go with being in a writer's group. Also, you can be specific in Word Weavers about what you're looking for. Are you looking for a line edit? Are you looking for proofing? Are you looking for character arc or plot arc? Are you looking for a content edit? Are you looking for a punctuation edit? Are you looking for something specific? Like, for example, I'm working on a novel now, and I had a character sketch, a very critical character, But what I spent days working on this character sketch. And so this is not something that needed critiquing because this is just for me. But what I wanted to know from my group was, is this logical? Does this sound believable? Because, fiction has to be believable and nonfiction unbelievable. It's like, wow, that was unbelievable. But fiction, you have to believe it could have happened. So is this believable for a character? And they were able to give me some feedback that I desperately needed. So that developmental edit that sometimes we need, like, I don't know, I think my character is doing something here that's out of character. And because this is my group that's been working with me on this, they kind of know my character, or I don't know about this plot point. So I need your opinion on this plot point. I don't care about the periods. I don't care about the commas. I don't care about the quotation marks. I just need to know what you think about the character development. So you can be specific and ask for what it is that you want. And just that being able to say, yeah, this works, this doesn't work, and being open to that. And we all have to be open to that. I don't care how many books you published. I don't care how many articles you published, how many devotions have been in devotionals that you published, et cetera, blog post, whatever it is, children's books, I don't care. We all have to be open to, that just didn't work, because we all have those off days. And it's better for my group, who I trust, to tell me what doesn't work than for me to go on Amazon or BookBub or Goodreads or any of the other places where, critiques are given to our work, and to hear, oh no, this is the worst thing she's ever written, or I could not believe these characters, they were unbelievable. I would rather my critique group tell me that, because I can fix it now. I can't fix it once it's been published. The other thing about the critique groups that I think is important, and we can do this in Word Weavers, is that you can be genre specific. You can either be in a mixed genre group or a genre specific group. Now, our trad groups or traditional groups are not genre specific, but within those traditional groups, oftentimes genre specific groups will form. So let's say, like, Jan goes to Word Weavers Orlando. I went to Word Weavers Orlando, but within Word Weavers Orlando, which is on the second Saturday of every month, the third Tuesday of every month, a fiction group broke off from that, or a nonfiction group, or a children's lit group, or a screenplay group, et cetera. They can break off from that and meet at a separate time. In Word Weavers online groups, there are open genre groups, but then there are also genre specific groups, right down to fanfic, which was something I had never heard of. And now I'm in that group. So, but I also think, while we are going to be critiqued, and that can be positive, that should be positive. While we are going to be critiqued, we also want to bring polished work. We don't want to sit down. If we're meeting on Saturday at 10, we don't want to get up Saturday at 6 and throw something into our laptop, print it off, and then run to the meeting and say, God just gave me this morning, which I've heard so many times. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, wow, God must not have had his coffee yet, because this is not good. So we want to bring polished work, because, once we've polished it as much as we can, then it's our critique groups that help us put that spit shine on it. And that, I think, is also important. This is also a place to learn the rules of great writing. And remember, you have to know the rules to break the rules. And then you have to know why you're breaking the rules. So, for example, my latest book, Dust, is written from the main character's point of view in first person. But then there are 3 others that are critical to the story. I wrote all 3 of those in third person point of view. And they're not used as often, but they're in there. And so I totally broke the rules with that, even though there's a lot of other people who have broken that rule before as well. But it's just, when you first walk in, you kind of get that, or first walk into writing, you kind of get that. You have to write in first person or third person. Don't ever write in second person. Don't write in omniscient. Do write in omniscient. You get all these rules. It's important to know the rules. And then I think it's important to break the rules for your own style, but you've got to know why you're breaking them. And critique groups are a great place to learn the rules. How many times have I said something or heard something while I'm in Word Weavers, and someone either says or I say, I didn't know that. And we all know most of us rely on Chicago Manual of Style for our work. I'm telling you, they're up there in Chicago or wherever they are. They're up there going, "Oh, what can we change next?" Just to confuse them. And so then, when we're doing things like subscribing to CMOS, or we are in our Word Weavers Facebook closed group, and somebody posts new rule, then that's how we find out and we can pass it along to others. There's also the emotional support, and that's for the good and the bad. For example, I have some really, really good news that I am going to be sharing with my pages that's coming up this month. I'm not going to say it here because it's not a done deal yet, but it's a really, really good piece of news. These are the people who would cheer with me, but these are also the people who will listen as I cry because something that I thought was going to happen falls through. Or, for example, when I went to my Word Weavers group and said, Tyndale didn't like it. I mean, they liked it, they didn't love it. And now I got to rewrite the whole thing. And I got 125,000 words to write in 2 months instead of 85,000 words to write in 6 months. And they can kind of get angry with me and go, "Oh, that's terrible." But then they are also behind me going, "Go, Eva, go." So it's a wonderful place for emotional support. And the last thing I want to say is that when you are in a critique group, you have to remember it's subjective. Not everybody's going to love your writing. They're not supposed to. It's all subjective. This is my opinion. Now, some things are absolutes, like, if somebody is in dialogue, you put quotation marks around it. If you go to a new paragraph and they're still talking, you don't use the end quote, but you use the beginning quote. So you leave that open. That's a rule that's not breakable. But other things are just opinion and it's just subjective. So, just as an example, everybody I know absolutely loved this book that came out last year. And now I can't remember the name of it, for heaven's sakes. But Oprah loved it. It was the Oprah Book Club. It was very Southern, so everyone thought I was going to love it. It starts off in the marshes, which is where I grew up. So everybody thought I was going to love it. Can't even think now what the title of this book was. Maybe some of you will remember what I'm talking about. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I got maybe 3 chapters in and said, I just can't read this. And yet so many people I know love that book. And then every so often somebody will come along and say, I didn't like it either. It's subjective. So you take what works for you and you kind of leave the rest, but you got to balance it with logic and say, okay, 7 people said that I need to move this paragraph. I'm going to move this paragraph. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm ready now to answer any questions you might have. I can't wait to go back and watch this. And I know all these little comments were coming up and I couldn't read them while they were coming up, but
Well,
I look forward to hearing what you guys were saying or reading what you guys were saying.
we're really glad that you're here too and for sharing all this information. So I'm going to ask everybody to come back on if you want to come on. We did have one question in the chat that I saw. Oh, well, Tracy asked it. She is still here about where to find a Word Weavers chapter, how to get involved in Word Weavers.
Oh, Tracy, thank you so much. You can go to word-weavers.com. Word-weavers.com, and there is a map of the United States. Will show you if there's a traditional group in your area. If there's not a traditional group in your area and you want to get involved in online groups, then you can reach out to us. We'll tell you more about it. We have some specific questions for you, like, what do you write? What's the best time of day for you? What's the best day of the week for you? That kind of thing. Just so we can put you in the best group. But I will tell you that we have currently between 40 and 45 online groups, and we are stopping there. And once those spots are filled, they are filled. And then, we'll start a wait list, and we'll have something really wonderful planned for those who are on the wait list. And then they'll just advance up as people drop out or for whatever reason they leave.
Is Word Weavers open for writers that write for the general market and not just the Christian market?
Yes, absolutely. It is. Now we do have some rules. No sexually illicit content, no just salacious 4-letter words. I mean, no 4-letter words. So we do have a statement of faith and values. And so pretty much what you write cannot go against that. But let me just give you an example. Dust that just released for me. I wanted to write a book that I could hand across the aisle, so to speak, that I could stick outside the church door and say, here, read this. It's a moral story, but I didn't want to write it in such a way that non-Christians or people that, don't walk with, and not to say non-Christians, because some people will say, well, I'm a Christian because I believe in Jesus, but they're not walking the walk and talking the talk. You know what I'm talking about. And so they'll say, oh, I didn't like this because the character prayed all the time or kept quoting scriptures, whatever. And so I wanted to write something that I could stick outside of the church door, but would not be offensive, in my way of looking at it, to anyone within the church, and something that I would not be ashamed of in front of the Lord. So I did have one particular scene, though, that I was a little concerned about. And so I took it to my Word Weavers group, and this is what I said. This is what I want to know. I mean, go ahead and critique it if you will. Not this word here, move this paragraph there, whatever. You need a comma. But what I really want to know is, are you offended? Am I being offensive to the church, to Christ, to the body with this scene? And they all said, no. You're not asking a 10-year-old to read this. These are adults. And so we understand that this couple is having an affair. And of course, what happens is they destroy so many lives around them because of their sin. And of course, I was then using that as a juxtaposition to the main couple who followed the way God wants us to go into our marriages, and that is pure and holy. And so you see that the blessings of this marriage and then the destruction of this relationship, but then how they all tie together. And of course, I mean, so far I've got 3 really, like I'm probably going to burn for eternity for writing this kind of reviews, and that's okay. It's fine, because it proves, first of all, understand that when you get negative reviews, it says you didn't pay for that review, and that this is a real review. And this is the way they really feel. Amazon looks to make sure you have a nice balance in your reviews. Otherwise, they'll start taking away some of the good reviews. So I was kind of grateful for that. But when I looked at it, I had to say, okay, like one of them said I had descriptions of naked bodies, although she didn't actually write the word naked. She used asterisk because I guess she can't write that word. And I went back through the book and I can't find a single one. I'm trying to find it. Yes. Where are these naked bodies? I can't find it, but that's the way she read it, and that's okay. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, you can bring these things, but it cannot be anything that would be offensive to God. Yes.
Any other questions, Rhonda?
I do have a question. Tracy and I are in the same group, and I just love getting Tracy's critiques because they just bleed everywhere there's red. And that's what I love. I want somebody, I don't care if it has 2,500 comments on 2,500 words.
Yeah.
I want to know, all of what you think. And I tend to critique that way myself. And I guess my question to you, Eva, is how do you know if you're doing too much? I'm less concerned about what people say to me than when I give a critique. I don't want to be guilty of hurting anyone's feelings.
Right. Yeah. And that is such a great question. One of the reasons why I think being in these groups is so important, and not just, you're thrown from this one to that one to this one to that one, is that you get to know each other. And so let's say, for example, Johnny and I are in the same critique group, and I know that Johnny tends to be very sensitive about, I'm just picking on you, Johnny. Johnny tends to be very sensitive about her dialogue, you know. So I may hold back just a little bit in the group, but I may go to her privately and say, okay, Johnny, I just want to toss this out to you, and you do with it whatever you want to do with it. And I do, again, I think that's really the bottom line, is that nobody's telling you have to change it. They're telling you their thoughts, their opinions. What you do with that is totally up to you. And so there is that part of you that needs to be sensitive to the way you read others. And then there's like those, like you were saying for yourself, like, hey, honey, bleed all over the paper. I want to know. But remember that some of those red marks can be smiley faces. We have a guy that when I was attending Word Weavers Orlando, oh my gosh, he was the whole time somebody was reading my piece, he's just writing away. Jen, you know who I'm talking about. It's John. Oh my gosh. And I would think, oh my God, what is he finding? That he was actually writing all the things he loved about it, not just the things he didn't like. But here's the thing, the things that he was pointing out were like you could look at it and go, man, that is so nitpicky. But then once I would get home, I'd look at it and go, yeah, he's right.
Mhm.
Right. You know, and I got to where I couldn't wait. Like if I was in John's group, I would be so happy that I was going to get such a wonderful blend of, yeah, it's blood, but it's smiley face. And then it's blood, and it's going to help me grow as a writer, because he is a grammarian from the word go.
Well, I'll also say, just to anyone who's in a critique group, I'm really disappointed when I get a critique back and there's two comments. And this was so great. I couldn't find anything to criticize. And I'm like, I know it's not perfect. And to me, that just seems like a cop out.
Yeah, it is. I think those are the people who are kind of scared initially. They're afraid to say what they really think.
Yeah.
Eventually they'll come around, especially if they can give as good as they get. And to be able to say to them, I don't want to just get a smiley face. I want to know what didn't work for you. Those are the people who tend to be just a little shy about being honest.
Yeah.
And eventually they'll come around.
They will. Yeah.
Even I'm sorry, can I add on to what Rhonda was saying though? I have, as the moderator, I have tried to motivate a couple of these people to give us more. Do you have any insights on that, how to do that? It hasn't worked. I've done what you said and said, we want to, we want more.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked.
What I think might be a good idea is once you get away from the group, then to look at what some other people said and go back to that person that just tends to not want to give you that deep critique and say, what was your opinion on this? And what was your opinion on this? And you know what Rhonda said about this line? What is your thought on that? And even if they say, oh, yeah, I agree. Or no, I don't agree. Then say, tell me why. And just start digging with them to the why. But maybe do it privately, because if they are shy to do this, they're going to be, you're not going to want to embarrass them in front of everybody. And maybe that will help get them out of their shell. Some people just can't find anything wrong with anything in the world. And God love them. I wish sometimes I was one of those people. I'm not.
If I could just jump in, good morning, Eva Marie, good to see you. I heard you say hello earlier, but my husband was behind me asking me a question. I'm co-president with my friend Marion Smith in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So first of all, if anybody is interested and lives around us, please feel free to connect with me. I just love the conversation that's going on, and it has really helped me tremendously, I think, as a writer, to be in a critique group of writers. I feel like my writing has improved, my confidence has improved. So many things that when I first started out, I needed to have. And I feel like as I begin to build Word Weavers here, that it begins to change who we are inside as well. You know, next month we are hosting on July 10th at my home a Word Weavers brunch. And we are just looking to get together and hang out and get to know each other a little bit better. So if anybody is interested in that as well. And I just want to say, I loved Dust.
Thank
I
you.
had the opportunity to interview you. I think it's 4 times now.
Yeah.
We have done interviews. And if you're interested in learning more about that, go to joemasaroministries.com and you can find all 4 of Eva Marie's interviews on her books. And Johnny, you were on there so much as well.
Love it. Love being on your program.
Well, and you know, Joe launched her Word Weavers right as the pandemic hit. And so the fact that I will say this, I think we lost out of 54 chapters, we lost 3, but we had about 3 that during the pandemic. And of course they had to do it on Zoom and then eventually go back to their just meetings. And some of them never went to Zoom because they were in areas that were not very hard hit and they could get into a room that was big enough with their mask or whatever. And I did not, in fact, I do not, I don't have time to micromanage every group. I'm letting every group, you know, go as they want to go. There are certain areas of this that I have like put my foot down. We are not going to start hybrid groups where half of them are on Zoom and half of them are in person. It's just way too much. I just can't handle it. It's too much for the presidents and it's too much for the president. But Joe launched in the middle of all of that. And so just more power to her.
We are not giving up. Okay. We are not giving up in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
That's right. Good. Good. And this is the other thing I say, if you want, you know, first of all, let me just tell you that if you want to start a Word Weavers group,
right,
not in an area where there is a trad group now, we have everything we need put in place to help you. You're not just, you know, handed a key and like go.
Right.
Renee is the president of a chapter, I don't remember all presidents, unfortunately, but I do know that Renee is the president of her chapter. Joe is the president of her chapter. And they do just a wonderful job. And then of course, all the presidents that are in online groups, I'm not ever aware. Sometimes I am and sometimes not. Jan, are you the president of an online group? I thought you were. And some of you others may be as well, or some of you just may be in the group, but we train you. And we are there for you. And then we assign you a mentor. And that is a person who stays right there with you and make sure, you know, you get everything you need, you have everything you need and answers your questions. And if they can't answer your question, then they go to this is that whole Jethro Moses thing. They go to the person who is over them. And then if that person can't answer it, then they come to me or they come to Taryn. So we've certainly got it laid out where we just toss you out there on your own.
Right.
We have certain rules that I stand by and will always stand by, like the way we critique. You have to be a member to critique or be critiqued. You can come twice to observe, and then it's you know, fish or cut bait. You're not going to be able to just come and observe, because you know what will happen. They can't critique, they can't be critiqued, but they're gleaning information. Then they're not giving back. And I don't want that. I want this to be about giving and taking this. We are a community, and that's not community-like. We are a family, and that's not family-like. So, you know, 2 or 3 rules there that I stand by. Other than that, I tell the presidents, I don't care how you do this. I don't care the time of day. I don't care the day. You know, I don't care if you bring donuts and coffee, as long as you're not using your money to pay for it. I don't care if you stand on your head and eat peanut butter while you're critiquing. I don't care. What I do care about is how we critique and how our members are treating others and then being treated. That's what I care about.
Isabel, she's got her hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Isabel's from France.
I'm in France and I have a kind of rhinitis, so my voice is also like Eva Marie. Thank you for all that you shared. I was just wondering, like, when you're in a church and you decide church planting, you would need the people to have been members for quite a while and to bear what is like the mark of the family of the church, or the way the church operates. And I would think you would need like probation to start a new chapter of Word Withers, like maybe being for 2 years as a member and a servant also in the community, so that you really get the spirit of what's going on.
Well, I mean, that unfortunately, that's not possible simply because if you wanted to start a group in your area, how can you start a group in your area without, and be a member when there's no group in your area? Some people will come and they will observe online groups, or they will become a part of online groups, and then they will launch. Others will just observe online groups because it's a great way to observe how we critique, and then they will launch. But again, when you launch, we do not just throw you out to the wolves. We are right there with you to make sure, number one, that you are following the rules, so to speak, but then also that you're not floundering in the in the deep end, going, help me, I'm down one time, down two times, there I go, down three times. We don't do that, and it's a lot for us to shepherd and to look over, but I think it's worth it. My co-director for a lot of years was Mark Hancock. By the way, and I didn't mention this, we own Florida Christian Writers Conference. We literally bought it in 2012, and we had our very first Florida Christian Writers Conference owned and operated by Word Weavers in 2013. But my co-director, and he was also the vice president for a lot of years of Word Weavers, is Mark Hancock. And I'll never forget one time at the end of Florida Christian Writers Conference, everybody was leaving, everybody was hugging, kissing, crying, see you next time, that kind of thing, walking out. And Mark was just standing there looking, and he said, Eva, this is kingdom work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought,
Absolutely.
wow. It boggles my mind that I almost didn't go to that meeting. It'll make me cry every time I think about it. What God had in store for me, but I got so full of myself. Oh, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to walk in late. But God had something big planned for me, because this is big to me, but bigger for everybody else. And, in 2015, the Lord and I got into a wrestling match, and you know what happens when you wrestle with God. He wins, you limp. But we got into a big wrestling match. It actually was 2014. Because he began to whisper in my heart that my work was going to be less about my writing and more about the writings of others. And that I was really, that Word Weavers was about to do something massive, and it was already doing something massive, but not nearly like what it is today. And that he was going to need me, at the helm. And I let God know real quick, wait a minute. Whoa. I have worked for years now for my career. Let us not forget that, I don't want it to be about everybody else. I want it to be about me. And it was like, nope, it's going to be about everybody else. I'm like, nope, it's going to be about me. And so we did that for about 2 months, and God won and I limp. So I kind of was a little unhappy about, God placing me at the helm, because it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work to shepherd and to oversee and to make sure, like you were saying, Isabel, that people are ready for this, that they're not just tossed into the deep end of the pool. But several years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was at the SALA Awards, which is, my job. That's one of my jobs, is coordinating that. And I looked up at the screen, and I was just giving that introduction, and it said, Eva Marie Everson, President, Word Weavers International. And something inside of me just went whoosh. And I just thought, I'm exactly where I belong. This is exactly where I belong. And I realized then God did not say, you will never write again. He said it will be less about you and more about others. And you know what happens when it's less about you and more about others? It becomes all about Jesus. And I just can't figure out a better place to be.
Yeah. May I share something?
Yes, please.
Because I'm French, but I accepted Jesus in England. So my heart is really with the English British community. So I belong to a Scottish community called Prophetic Scots. And they keep giving us this word that they have for 1 year. And I just give it to you. So it's from the NIV 2011. It's Isaiah 60. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. So take it for you, Eva Marie, and let us all take it for ourselves. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. And it's like, it's a time for us not to be hidden, but to just bring to the light the treasures of, we've got the Holy Spirit in us. It's just the whole, it's the Trinity, it's God living in us. And when we just flow and overflow and are filled to the brim, and well, I don't want to be preaching, but you understand.
That's lovely. And I so appreciate that. Isabel, are you from Scotland originally?
No, I'm French. Born.
Are you French?
Yes, I'm French.
Oh, okay. All right.
I went to England.
I can hear it now. I can hear it now. No, I was just going to say, yeah, my neighbor is French from France, and I've been trying to brush up on my French because now my grandson, who is 8, is taking French, and he called me one day, and he said, "Bonjour, Mimi," and I said, "Oh, bonjour, Vanche, comment ça va?" And there was a pause, and he says, "Mommy, I don't know that one." But I was just going to say, I was in Scotland a couple of years ago, and like for all the English that was being spoken around me, I couldn't understand a single word anybody was saying. It was just very eye-opening. It was a beautiful visit. And my next trip over, I'm planning to go to Paris. So I'm excited about it. Really brushing up on my French.
We are way past the hour, and
here we are.
Even appreciate you for staying on and being here. There's one more question that was asked way back, so I don't want to ignore it. And then, so it's Patricia's question. I'm going to ask it in the comments, and then we will close out. And everyone who can stay for the after party, please stay. And if you have more questions, and if Eva Marie has time, we can do that. So Patricia asked, if a nonfiction piece is not biblically sound but presented as such, what do you suggest is Word Weaver exclusive to biblical believing Christians?
Yeah, no,
that's a hard question.
Actually, back in the day when we had just Word Weavers Orlando, and we would have a retreat every year, and we would have the member of the year was awarded. Our very first member of the year was Jewish. And when he contacted me and said, "Hey, I've heard about your group. I would really like to come." And Jan, you probably remember Mark Ozeroff. And he said, I'm certainly not there to argue Judaism versus Christianity. I just want to grow as a writer. And I said, that's fine. And so he came, and that very first time he was there, he said, I'll be the token Jew. And I said, actually, you're the second Jew. Jesus is at every meeting. And he was so stunned by that. He would actually stay and go to church with us because we held the meetings at Northland Church. And so he was Jewish, but he was actually writing, believe it or not, from a Christian perspective. One of the things, though, that I say about the nonfiction work, we are not here to debate theology. There are times when there is something written that I know is going to go against the CBA standard. And so my comment is not to your theology, but just to say that if you're planning to publish this within the CBA world, like, you know, the CBA houses, you're going to have a difficult time with this thought. It's not for us to get into a debate as to this versus that. You know, baptism is supposed to be dunking versus sprinkling, infant versus, you know, when you're old enough to make a decision, or any of the other myriad of things that we differ on. But it's supposed to be about the writing. So when I'm asked that question, like somebody will call me and say, oh, we had somebody who brought something in that was theologically a little questionable. This isn't a theological debate group. This is a writing group. How was it written? And you may make a statement such as, it's not going to fly in CBA, but if you're going to self-publish, honey, you just go right on ahead. Because that's not what we're here for.
Good answer. Good answer. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Next week, we're actually are going to do some critiques. So we're going to put an announcement up in the Facebook group. So be watching for that, because we will need some volunteers to submit. We're only going to do one page so that we can do multiple ones. So we'll want you to submit. They are a lot of fun, but it will have to be very, very short. So be looking for that. That should be up either later today or tomorrow. So that's what we're doing next week. Again, thank you. Thank you, Eva Marie. This was fabulous.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to now leave and go have lunch with my husband.
Okay, well, you do that. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.